First, I wanted to say the hospitality in this home is beyond. And
Set the
I
bar
did
tender.
ask Suzanne, because I knew this is really her ministry. And I was talking to her about being Queen Esther. Queen Esther had this problem. She was the queen, obviously the most beautiful, but of all the wives, the king had a number of wives. And so he was going to kill all the Jewish people, and she was Jewish. So she didn't know what to do. So not knowing what to do, she threw a banquet for the king. And after that, nothing happened. So she couldn't figure out anything else, so she threw another banquet for the king. And I think she threw a third banquet for the king. Finally, he says, okay, what do you want? He didn't argue. She didn't make a committee. She didn't a petition, a campaign. She did what a woman can do. Get to a man through his stomach. And it worked. And she said, my people just need the weapons and we can fight your army. And they won. And that became the celebration of Purim. I've been in Israel in February, in Purim, when the wicked king was used by God to save the Jewish people. And that's the book of Esther. And I look at women trying to be men and doing all these things. And I look at Esther, and then I look at Suzanne, and I say, she's really not involved in all that stuff. What she knows is this. And that works. And so I have a lot of admiration for that. Lots of admiration for her. She does a great job.
Thank you.
And I knew her home would be open for this. And you'll know why. Because this is in honor of Robert and Donna. Because they have been health crusaders before me, before a lot of people, actually before most of Christianity. And Robert and I have talked about this, the confusion in the church and in the Bible, and natural healing.
Where
And
did you
do
find
we
that
worship?
whole picture?
That's all I had. Do we worship?
You guys look the
nature?
same.
Do we worship vitamins? All these things that become confusing. And I was from a Baptist church before I came here, and the preacher really wanted people not to live longer. He didn't want me talking about anti-aging pills, which I didn't. I refused to do at church. I didn't think it was too commercial. But the whole idea of living longer was the Bible story, and he didn't want it robbed from the church.
The animals in this house are just uncontrollable.
It's a fire. And he wanted people to live shorter lives so that they'd feel like they were going to lose their life and they needed to come to Jesus now. And so my problem with that was I thought the Bible had something to do with like living 900 years or something. This just didn't hit me as exactly the right motive. But nonetheless, this has been a little bit of the confusion. By the way, I feel honored also to have Dr. Jolliffe here because I know of his.
He's here?
Where'd he go?
He left the bathroom's not coming back. Because of his skillful handling of people and all these things. So I think it's wonderful that he's here to sort something out here a little bit. So back to the first slide if you can. So the power of healing, the power of God. Because in history, the people who had the power to heal were considered gods. That's what they were considered. And I did a historical analysis of this. 2 slides more. Back. In history, here's the Egyptians and the Greeks. Here's all the gods of healing that they had. If you could heal, you were a god. And they had one for pain, and they had one for sanitation, and whatever it all is. This is what they had. And the kings and queens, the king of England eventually said, because they came to him for healing at one time a year, and the king said, get off of this. I can't heal anybody. I'm just a mere man. Next slide. And this is exactly what happened in a little city called Lystra. And here Paul and the disciples had healed somebody, and then this was a city that had a lot of gods, Zeus and all these things. And so they were going to make Paul and his disciples gods too, and they were trying to make some little icons and all this stuff, and they were running through the crowds. Don't you dare, don't do this, we're only human like you are. And this is the dilemma I bring to you, because even the Catholic Church kind of, if you've got 2 miracles, you're a saint, kind of, you can like heal 2 people or these kind of things, kind of stuff that goes on. You must be a god or a saint or something. But this was what was really going on. So, next slide. So, there's going to be moments in this presentation when you're going to wonder if I'm like undoing the miracles. Don't, just let me get through it. I'm not going to take any miracles away. I'm going to help you see it in a different way than maybe you think you heard it. But don't, if it's your miracle and you want to hold on to it, please. I wasn't around for it, so I'm just giving you my rendition. But just so you know, a miraculous healing occurs instantaneously. The lepers on the road go because they're going to think you're involved in blasphemy, and so go, and they all were healed instantaneously. And the lady who reached and touched Jesus' garment and was healed of a bleeding, that would be a miraculous. And a natural healing would take time. Paul is blinded by a light, probably lightning. It takes him 3 days later to regain his sight. We think maybe that was a natural healing. We'll explain it to you so that you understand. We think God is hands-on all of these. God is both natural and supernatural healing. Supernatural just meaning a lot faster. That's my definition. Okay. So let's go to the next slide. So we should know that the Bible is about facts. It's not about fables. It's not a comic book. It's real. I took my son to Israel for him to see this place is real. I'll explain to you a special place a little bit later in the slides that proved to me that Jesus was real and lived. He was a real man, and what happened there. But that's the deal. The people perish for lack of knowledge. We know that. Knowledge of what? I've often said a person who has the answer is better than a committee that can't figure themselves out. If you have the answer, then you don't need a committee. Wasn't that our Lord Jesus? So Bible sometimes portrayed as being archaic, presents some rather advanced health measures. There are 613 biblical commandments. The 213 are health rules. And Christians often defensive about inexplicable things in the Bible, like, you mean the patriarchs lived hundreds of years? Really? That's got to be a comic book if you ever heard one. Next. So the Holy Bible provides advanced health information centuries ahead of when they were discovered. Matthew? But I'm going to take a sidelight here for a second. There is nothing more poisoning in someone's life than watching their brother or their sister or their mother suffer and ask, why, God, would you do this? And it so happened, Matthew, the physical and mental challenges can sour us towards God because we're asking, if there really is a God, why does he make us suffer? Why? Why? Why, oh God, hast thou forsaken me, says Jesus. Next slide. I'm giving you a live example. Ted Turner, head of CNN, his sister dies of a skin condition, dies of it. He was a devout Christian. He prayed, and God didn't come through. And he lost his faith over a healing that didn't occur. He begged God even to let her die. And the family broke apart. All this, it was just a big confusion for him. And he lost his faith over this. This changed Ted Turner's life because his sister died. And God didn't come through. Next slide. So we have to go to I often see this in church, and people say, well, you pray for me. I've got to close a mortgage, and I'm a real estate guy, and I've got to do this, and I've got to do that. And I go, doesn't that sound like you're putting God to the test? Is there a God if there's the no answer? Well, we don't think of it that way. But we're not supposed to be putting God in a corner. We're just supposed to be accepting the outcome. And I don't think, I'm around a lot of Christians, and I think sometimes they're putting God to the test, like Ted Turner did. His whole faith was based on that one thing. So I just bring it up because people wander into this sometimes. Next slide. So see now that I am he and there is no God besides me. It is I who put death and give life. Both. I have wounded it, and it is I who heal. Your heavenly Father sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. We have a free will. We can do what we want. God isn't going to take it away, or we're robots. If you want to stand in front of a train and get killed, you will. God isn't going to come pull you out of there. Or he's taking away your free will. And you have to know God by your free will, which Dr. Jolliffe would tell you is love. If it's forced on you, it isn't love. And we can't experience love without this. So, next slide. So the Bible records the first mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Here it is, Elisha. You've heard the story, and he puts his body over the child to heat it up, and he does this. This is the first resuscitation that we have in recorded history. Next slide. And we actually have a thing here. Jacob knew of Mendelian genetics. He was kind of trying to get back at somebody else, but he had to make some animals, and so he knew to mix them, and he'd make spotted animals. See, Mendelian is a red and a white flower. Somewhere down there, when you cross-pollinate them, you're going to get a pink flower. And that was Mendelian genetics. Well, Jacob knew of it because he knew how to do this. It's just it wasn't named this, but he knew what it was. Next slide. So there are both natural and supernatural healings in the Bible. God rules over natural and supernatural healing. Next slide. And God designed our bodies to be self-healing. God can heal us in 2 speeds, fast or slow. Supernatural, quick and instant. Natural takes time. So examples of miraculous healings. Jesus heals the crippled man, comes lowered down through the roof. We know of that. And here's the one, touches the garment, and she had a bleeding disease. Women have these bleeding issues, and and here's Jesus heals a man who's been a paralytic for 38 years in the pool of Bethesda. These are all miraculous healings by whatever definition that I could dig up and see. Obviously, he raises Lazarus, and that's another whole experience I'll tell you about some other day. Next slide. Healing of lepers who were sent on their way. And here again, as I said, they were healed instantly. And he sent them on their way because he thought they would be killed because they thought he was doing blasphemous things. And so he was really protecting them. So natural healings in the Bible. Well, we have the suffering of Job. Everybody knows Job is the sufferer. He was a man of great wealth, lost it all. And he was smitten with boils from the sole of his foot unto his crown. And he had mud on his itchy skin, and his skin became bronze. He had iron overload. That's what iron overload is. The iron becomes bronze skin. Any alcoholic can get this way if you're really into it. And so he develops. In the Bible, he becomes ill. Many of his friends offered health advice. You must have done something against God to deserve this. Yeah. And so his worthless physicians, said Job, came to help him. He called them his worthless physicians. They pointing at him, and what did he have? A niacin deficiency. When you're niacin, you are in a mud bath. Your skin is horrible. And you've got the 3 Ds, dermatitis, diarrhea, and dementia. He was out of his mind for a while. And he regained some money. His family and others came, and I presume, remember I wasn't there, I'm just giving you a rendition of this, but his diet improved. He got the niacin that he needed, and this is what horrible pellagra looks like. Let's read the story of Job, and you'll know this is what he had. So we have another one. And this one's really good and interesting to study. So Naaman is a Syrian army captain, and the Syrians come and kidnap all the Jewish kids. Take them back. They're slaves. And there's a captive Jewish girl, and she hears about Naaman's skin condition. And so she's saying, you know, if you go back to, if only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his skin condition. By all means go. I will send a letter to the king of Israel, says his master. Okay. Next slide. So Naaman comes to see who? The king in where he's going goes, I don't want this guy back here again. He took all of our kids last time. I'm not going to handle him. You handle him. So he punts and hands it to Elisha. So Naaman left, and he wanted to give these talents of silver and 6,000 shekels and gold and all this to Elisha. With this letter I am sending my servant Naaman to you so that you may cure him of his skin problem. Go ahead, son. And Naaman, with this letter of introduction, I have sent Naaman as my servant to you that you may cure him. And the king, as I explained, am I God to kill and make alive? This man is sending you to cure the skin disease. So the king's trying to get out of this. Next slide. The Israelite king refers him to Elisha, God's prophet, who refuses to see Naaman. Naaman wants what? A laying on of hands. He wants the cure.
He wants miraculous cure.
He wants the miraculous cure. So, next. I thought, surely you will come out to see me and stand and call on the name of the Lord and wave his hand over the place and cure me. He wanted a laying on of hands. And aren't the rivers in Syria better than the rivers here? I could have washed in them and been cured. Next slide. But Naaman is persuaded by his sub-captain, and so he is told to wash 7 times in the river Jordan. Now 7 times takes a little bit more than instantaneous. Well, we came all this way, we might as well wash. Next slide. Naaman's skin condition disappears. Next slide. Well, you see, the river Jordan is coming down up here, and it goes all the way down here to the Dead Sea, and these are the salts that are on the shore. And that is sulfur. Ugh, you can smell the sulfur, and there's selenium in here. And another phenomena is it's very bright. It's the lowest place on Earth, and there is tremendous reflection and sunlight and vitamin D. And so here, next slide. Today, many people with skin conditions go to the Dead Sea and get mineral bath therapy because it's fed by the River Jordan to this Dead Sea, the mineral deposits. Next slide. And so he's cured, and it's that's what that river had in it. And so Elijah rejects the gifts from Naaman. And what now? Imagine he took them. Who gets the credit? Elisha. Yeah. Naaman refuses the gifts. What does the Syrian army captain say? There is no other God in all the earth but in Israel. By denying the gift. If he took it, he would have got the credit. Naaman knows this. Is there a lesson here for a guy we know named Benny Hinn? Probably. Next slide. Vitamin D, but for you who obey me, my saving power will rise you in like the sun and bring healing like the sun's rays, said the Bible, Matthew. And here's our COVID death rate, and here's normal vitamin D, and here's insufficient and deficient.
Yep, there you go.
Well,
we can get it in a pill today, sunshine in a bottle. We're lucky. Next slide. These are the equinoxes, vernal, autumn, autumnal, winter, and summer. You know they had festivals for the summer solstice? It was the time when you stopped dying. It wasn't just that the crops grew. It was the time of death. You came out of winter. Do you know that the death rate from heart disease and cancer and all that stuff is winter, plus the flu and all that stuff? That's winter. They knew this. They had, from ancient times, celebrations over it finally breaking into summer. They knew this. Next slide. This is the coronavirus season, and over to there. This is influenza over to there. You see the months. Here's cancer and heart attack, same thing. So it tells you something.
Yep.
When you see that this is occurring outside of that cycle, you know somebody spiked the disease to occur outside of its season. Somebody is doing something unnatural. Next slide. It was Edgar Hope Simpson. In the early parts, he lived quite a few years.
He did.
And he told us something, that a disease travels faster than the mode of transport at the time that he lived. It seemed to be in the next city faster than anybody could get there.
Yeah.
How? You see, it was their immunity inside from the lack of vitamin D, and it traveled because you went into winter and everybody was getting it. It had nothing to do with me coughing or sneezing on anybody. It traveled because the virus was always there, but you succumbed to it in winter when your vitamin D levels went down. And that is the mystery of us understanding all this, because modern medicine is built on all the medicines to cure you and vaccines and all this, and it has nothing to do with it. Nothing. It's your immune system. And I wrote an article. Nobody's dying of COVID. Everybody's dying of a weak immune system. It's real simple. Next slide. And here's just an example. Placebo, 800 units of vitamin D, 2,000 units, and this is for cold influenza season. So you see here's winter, normal, and here's what it is when you get the vitamin D, 800, and so on.
Yes.
That's it. We can't make any money this way. There's no meter on the sun. Next slide.
Well, yet, maybe.
People in Bible times.
Hey,
Yeah, well,
Gavin will figure out how to pass the sun.
Gates was working on dimming the sun, if you follow the deal.
He's still doing it.
So people in Bible times knew of germs, really. He must burn up the clothing or the woven or knitted material or wool or linen, and any leather article has the contamination in because the mildew is destructive. The article must be burned up. This is in the book of Leviticus. Next slide. Cleanliness and godliness are not separate in the Bible. Create in me a clean heart, O God. This was, cleansing was spiritual and physical. Yes, ma'am. So Moses instructed his soldiers to burn their clothing and cleanse their instruments of war when they returned from battle, knowing there was something in there that they brought back that brought back disease. So they knew something. They just didn't have a microscope. Next slide. They knew to cleanse their foods, so they took and dipped it and cleansed their food, kind of, if you get the idea. And they put it in the olive oil and dipped it in the vinegar. Vinegar is the best. I mean, you want to cleanse your vegetables or you eat them or anything, you just put it in vinegar. So vinegar is one of those wonderful things. And so they used in that time hyssop. Purify me with hyssop and I shall be clean. And a clean person shall take hyssop and dip it in the water and sprinkle it in the tent and all the furnishings and the persons who were there. So hyssop is a natural antibiotic. Next slide. And I show you this. This is from the plague in Europe. This is the doctor of the times. They knew about garlic, and he wrapped himself in this. And then in that bird beak, he put a garlic clove up there. It was inside, and here's his thing to hold the garlic cloves. And so we see a modern study here and they crush it, and the vapor from the garlic kills the bugs in the room. The article, this is new, relatively new. They knew to do this. He was breathing garlic vapor.
So every time you see one of those beaks,
I've got one.
that's
Yeah.
from a medieval doctor.
Yes, that's a medieval doctor. That's right. And so they knew about garlic somehow intuitively. In fact, there's nothing that's beaten garlic. Nothing. Nothing beats it. And we had an anthrax scare in the United States. And I got invited on the Howard Stern show, and I was a naive Christian who didn't know what he does on radio.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
I had no idea there were girls with no clothes in his studio.
Oh boy.
And they had me on the nationwide radio, and they said, Bill, you're not really going to use like garlic and oregano and that kind of stuff. I mean, this is anthrax. And I said, well, here's the study. And the farmers use garlic to cure their anthrax. They don't run to the hospital. And garlic has a molecule in it. And I listed all the amoxicillin and penicillin and all these types of, and garlic beat them all. It was in a clinical study, and I held it up. And he said, oh. I said, well, when one of these days resistance is going to set in, and then what are we going to use, Howard? Pause. He said, yeah, I understand now. And I said, yeah, we're going to use garlic and oregano. The next day, NBC News was holding up a bottle of oregano. This does not cure,
Yeah, exactly.
And I set that whole thing off by answering it, getting him to respond, yeah, I guess that's what we're going to do. And garlic actually kills anthrax. So here is the Bible. This is in God's voice now, and it's in Deuteronomy. And I will send grass into the fields for the cattle. And you're supposed to feed the cattle grass, says God. Why? We're feeding them corn now. Okay, so which is sugar. So here's the E. coli from the stomachs of the cattle with the grass-fed, and here's grain-fed. Here's the bugs, the E. coli. See? Here's the feedlot. Here's the grass-fed.
Wow.
That's why you eat grass-fed beef.
That's why you eat grass-fed beef.
Yep.
That's why you do that.
Absolutely.
That's why you
The
get-
grill at the dunes got the grass-fed beef.
They do.
Yeah, they
So
do.
now we have the Spanish flu of 1918.
Yeah, that was
And we
Spanish
began, that was the year they began marketing aspirin worldwide. And they had like a little, the matchbox with a little sliding opening? That's what they had. And you had no instructions how many to take. So people panicked and they just horfed down aspirin tablets.
Me too.
You know what Ray's syndrome is?
Yes.
You give it to a kid, you give him an aspirin and he dies.
Yeah.
That's because, I'll explain it in a minute, it robs you of vitamin C. And this massive die-off of people could have been aspirin overusers who depleted vitamin C and killed themselves.
Oh, how tragic.
My grandma, she lost her dad and her baby brother in that flu.
They also were using arsenic weed killers. We're using them now because we use Roundup, which is, I want to say the name of the word. No, glyphosate. Yeah, glyphosate. But it isn't the glyphosate. They're not telling you it also has arsenic in it. Arsenic depletes zinc from the soil. It depletes zinc from your body, and you need zinc to make the T cells from your thymus gland right here. And so it's depleting zinc, and this is why we're prone to disease today, is because we're using arsenic inside the Roundup.
Is that why we're hearing so much about thyroid problems? Like thyroid
That
cancer, we know several people have thyroid
That
cancer.
too. But we'll tell you, most thyroid cancer from a nodule that's not cancerous at all. That's usually.
Jim Case was telling me his tinnitus has subsided taking zinc.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So this was all in an era before vitamins were fortified into foods. This pandemic that occurred in 1918. Next slide. And so here was the aspirin doing all this, and the marketing went worldwide, and they had it everywhere, and this is what happened. And so the Rey syndrome, we know now, don't give vitamin C to kids, you'll kill them. I mean, don't give aspirin to kids, you'll kill them, and it's because it depletes vitamin C. So here's the history here. Penicillin invented in 1929. It was introduced into clinical use and its first evidence of resistance. So everything that man makes, garlic, yeah. Okay.
Never reported.
Next
Look
slide.
at that.
So here's Fleming, and he finds this mold, and the bugs go away, and so we have penicillin. Next slide, 1928. And so we see the return of the biblical plagues. You see, here's how we test an antibiotic. We put it in a lab dish and see how wide the area of bug-free area is. We can't use humans and test them and see if they die or not, so we just use a
We
plate.
do now.
Oh, bam. Yeah.
So virtually all current available drugs are going to fail here, it says. Go ahead, son.
So can I ask a question? So like in the Civil War, they didn't have antibiotics, and they said most of the people died of an infection because they got shot or whatever. And they say if we'd only had antibiotics, we would have been able to save all these people.
But if you actually knew, the Romans figured this out years.
They couldn't have used garlic.
The Romans they had a whole little troop went up. They had a 12-man phalanx that moved around. They were trained in hand-to-hand combat.
Yeah.
And then they had a little troop that brought garlic, and everywhere the army moved, they planted shoots. It's not seeds. You got to plant the shoots.
Yes.
And they went with them. And when they went into war, they were chewing garlic. When they went into battle, the Roman and the centurions instructed them to chew garlic. And the main reason why troops in modern times and other times die is not the wounds. It's the dysentery from the water where they just moved into, and they died of dysentery. And you had to cleanse the water. That was the problem. But that's another whole issue. And so here's the penicillin resistance. It's where we use all the antibiotics, all the modern countries. This is where it all is. Next one. So here's our history. 2000 BC, here, eat this root. 1000 AD, root. That root is heathen. Here, say this prayer. 1850, prayer superstition. Here, drink this potion. 1920, potion is snake oil. Swallow this pill. 1945, the pill is ineffective. Here, take this penicillin. 1955, oops, bugs mutated. Here, take this tetracycline. Oops, 39 more times. Oh, the bugs have won. Eat this root. I mean, it just comes full circle.
Yeah.
So this is where we are. Some guy wrote that up. That wasn't me. So they did this study of garlic and oregano, allspice, and what was the other one? And oregano. Oregano, allspice, onion.
That looks like an onion, yeah.
They killed every known bacterium. There was a study done in 1997, Cornell University. They killed every germ, E. coli, whatever you name it, killed them all. So
do you eat it and make a soup? I mean, how do you?
get in there.
Okay.
Will you hold that thought?
We want recipes. Susan will make it, whatever
We're
the.
gonna make it for all.
Bring a garlic ice cream.
Olive oil,
She's the
garlic
church
cake.
pharmacist.
We have a
Gonna do an enema. That's why.
terrible problem of sudden infant death. We cannot
That's
explain this.
horrible.
There was a doctor, Sprott, in New Zealand, and he taught the mothers to turn the babies over, head up, not on their tummy, and the rates went down. And they're using and still use a fire retardant in the mattresses, and the babies pee in there, and it makes a gas, and it gets in the lung of the baby, and they die. And I wrote a whole book about this, and Sprott told everybody about it. And everybody did it, even though they were telling you he was kind of a nutcase, but everybody did it, and everybody agreed, well, put your baby on his back. And that's this angel of death comes because the babies didn't know about the fire retardant, and this is what happened. Anyway, go back. What happened when the COVID lockdown happened? What happened?
Everybody went inside out of the sun.
True?
There was less babies.
The
than
kids didn't get to the doctors
Yeah.
for their shots.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's no sick
And
deaths.
what happened to sudden infant death?
Gone. I know.
Wow.
Gone. Emergency room doctor said we don't have any anymore.
Oh,
We
wow.
don't have any
That's one
anymore.
good thing COVID did.
Just unbelievable.
Go ahead.
Fires this whole thing.
So God advised health precautions to the Israelites as they entered Canaan. See, here they were in Egypt. Let my people go.
Yeah.
Run across the Red Sea. Wander down here to Mount Sinai. Wander 40 years. He finally tells them, you're going to go to the land of milk and honey. You're going to go to north. And when as you go north, next slide, another route so we can see how it occurred. Here's where they were wandering in the desert. And so, next slide. And he says, as they entered the land of Canaan to the north, which was more moist, God warned Moses and Aaron of the hazard posed by mold.
I can attest to that. No.
Next slide. If the plagues be in the walls of the house, greenish or reddish, said the scriptures, then the priest shall shut the house 7 days, and come again the seventh day, and shall look, and behold, and the plague be spread. And then the priest shall command that they take away the stones, and shall cast them to an unclean place outside the city. What do we do today when we have mold in a home? You cannot clean it with Clorox. You cannot get it out of the wood. You cannot do any of those things. You're going to follow this prescription. You're going to take the building blocks out of your home.
That's what they do.
The wood, you're going to take the walls out.
They do.
Or they encapsulate it.
This was all well known. And go ahead, son. And they call this stachybotrys. It's a reddish thing, just like explained in the Bible. That's the name of it, stachybotrys, greenish or reddish. American Academy of Pediatrics. You've got to remove the wallboards.
Going to infant
Thank you. They told them in the Bible a long time.
infant sudden death.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next slide. So then comes the last of the four horsemen, the four most frightening of it all. They were given power over a fourth of the earth to kill by sword, famine, and plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth. Wild beasts, contaminated with bugs, and plague. This is where we are today. Next slide. So, we have, and G.W. Bush hired an esthetician, an ethics guy. I don't know,
Yeah.
hired an ethics guy who ran around trying to tell everybody that we want to die on time. We don't want to interfere with God. We should die on time. See, government doesn't have the money to pay for all this. And so they just want us to die on time. And in fact, I wrote an article 3 months ago that Medicare could figure out now how many were going to die of this pandemic, and they figured they needed 360,000 to die to balance their budget.
Oh boy.
We are out of money in Medicare, and we are out of money in Social Security. That's what a lot of this is all about. The insurance companies are running the show because they have to pay on private insurance. That's what this is all about. That's what the reset is, but we won't go there long. So, can we live any longer in the service of God? Can you imagine how much wisdom you would have had if you could live hundreds of years like the patriarchs? How much knowledge you would have had? So here we are, next slide. The current manufacturer's suggested lifespan, however, is 120 years. The lifespan went down. Moses lives this long with pure good eyesight and strength, and he didn't flicker for years in chronic disease. He just went out 120 years, and exactly this is where we are now. You see people living 116, 117. They're living, but we just can't. This is the Bible was right. This is as far as we can live. Most people not living this long.
Right. You have to live in a
But-
blue zone.
But can we live any longer? And what is our maximum lifespan? Next slide. That it may be well with thee and thou mayest live long on the earth, said Paul. It's okay. Next slide.
Yes.
So here they are. And here's the patriarchs, and you can see how long they were living. And it comes down here to the flood.
What was that?
It got on the wrong side down there. Here we are. Next slide.
Oh, there's mold after
Look
the
at it
flood.
this way. Well,
There was
So
too much
here's the
mold after that
longevity.
water.
here's the longevity, 900 years. Here's all we've been in. And then the flood, and then it seems to go down. What happened? What happened?
Mold.
Next slide.
Yeah.
So it comes out that in the Garden of Eden, all the
Oh.
animals produce their own vitamin C internally,
Huh?
and we used to make vitamin C internally.
What?
And so your sugar is made in your liver, glucose. We eat fructose from corn. We eat sucrose from cane sugar. But we make glucose. And you have to have sugar. You're going to see, that's when you see spots before your eyes, when your sugar's too low. And so you're going to have a cube of sugar brought and put in your mouth if you're a surgeon and you're working and got spots before your eyes. A nurse is going to put it under the mask for you. So you have to have sugar, and the body made you. You make sugar. It's glucose, and it just goes around out of the liver and comes back and is made into vitamin C in all the animals except fruit bats, guinea pigs, a few of the primate monkeys, and us. We had a gene mutation. Next slide. So all of these animals produce vitamin C, and we don't. Next slide. So here's the sugar. The liver makes glucose, comes out as vitamin C, and it needs that enzyme called gulonolactone oxidase, the missing enzyme. So, next slide. Here is a PET scan. If you want to know how they know for sure that you have cancer, they take radioactive sugar, they put it in your body, and the sugar goes right to the cancers because cancer feeds off of sugar. So that's where it goes, and you can see this person has metastatic spreading bone, liver, lung. That's where the sugar's going. What would happen if you didn't have the sugar going there?
If you deprive the body of the sugar, then it would kill the cancer.
All the animals have the sugar being converted to vitamin C so they don't get the cancer. Next slide.
And you have a cancer.
So you can inject that enzyme into a person in their vein and replace the enzyme. Unfortunately, it won't happen in our digestive tract. You have to inject it. Next slide. So, we were making vitamin C up to the flood. And then, you see, for everybody else to have that same gene mutation, there had to have been a bottleneck of people that were alive. And it affected them, and then the rest didn't make vitamin C, correct? It couldn't be everybody got this problem, so we have
Moses had
we
the
have this
genetic-
story where there was only, how many alive? 8.
Yes.
Noah's family, daughters and sons, and Noah and his wife. Only 8 alive. That's the bottleneck. And then we see the human lifespan go down like a progressive gene mutation. When you marry your sister, what happens?
Not good.
Gene mutations. Listen, I wasn't there for this. I'm just trying to put together.
Two and two together. Yeah, that math works pretty good.
Next slide. So the Bible says there were only 8 people, Noah's family, intermarried. Next slide. So here's the animals that also have the same genetic flow. Next slide.
Fruit bat.
So James Lind in England experiments. He gives lemon juice. Lime doesn't work. And the sailors were cured of scurvy. We didn't know what it was.
Lime does
you're
not
work? No, lime does not work. Lemon juice does. And anyway, it's bleeding. It's terrible bleeding, and you can't do anything. Your joints hurt. They call it lassitude. You can't do any work. The sailors couldn't do any work. Anyway, he finds out about this, and here's the little paltry amount of vitamin C you get in foods, which we're totally dependent on. And here's the guy who discovered vitamin C, Savet Georgi, in Romania, I believe it was. And the only way to make up for this deficiency is that or this. Wait a minute, we used to make how much vitamin C a day? Gorillas eat about 8 to 12,000 milligrams a day. They have the same problem we do. And they eat 8 to 12,000 bamboo and all this. And we get about 200 milligrams at most. Maybe 110 milligrams is what we get in our diet. Next slide. So here was the Garden of Eden. We at least got 640, but we were making our own vitamin C at the time. Here's what we get now. Next slide.
Wow.
So how much vitamin C do you need? Well, all these things increase your need for vitamin C. So when they tell you what's on the label and it says, what's the recommended daily allowance, That's for a perfectly healthy person. If you're any of these things,
Yeah.
it's not enough. Okay, next slide.
Can you hold the slides
Here,
just a
see
little bit
that?
longer?
Yes, please go back.
There's thousand of them.
So, by the way, you're going to have skin bruising when you have vitamin C. You know, you see these old people in the hospital, and the back side of their hand looks black and blue.
Yeah.
You see, their capillaries are
My
so
brother.
weak, and that's vitamin C, and then they're bleeding right under there. That's just a overt sign. Where's the vitamin C? I mean, a doctor should be just seeing it and saying, get them vitamin C pills.
But you just have to make sure you're drinking a lot of water with that.
Well,
Your body's
water,
absorbing it.
water's another whole story.
Is that, like,
But
you have
water
to
is the
make sure
great
that your body's
diluter.
absorbing
If you want to
it.
detox your body, drink water because it dilutes everything. So start there. But anyway, all these things are involved, and you need more vitamin C. So anyway, here's the alleged washout point where you can't get any more. Upper limit. Oh my God, I'm going to get 2,000 milligrams. Watch out! Look out! And how many milligrams did we make when we were making it? Well, it turns out that a billy goat, about 170 pounds like we are, makes 17,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day.
Wow.
And that's not when he's under stress. He'll make more, and I'll explain this. So go. So humans. So watch this. I'm going to do this again for you. You come back and I'll do it. Go. Are you, yeah, go. But you
Not
need to,
allowed, not
I love
allowed.
vitamin C.
but you need to hear
Go,
it.
go,
Go.
That's my name, dude.
So humans live 2 to 3.5 times beyond their age of physical maturation. So
Right.
we mature about age 18, age 20. Well, the animals live 8 to 12 times beyond.
Interesting.
Okay, more than we do. And so if humans live 8 to 12 times, we're getting up here, we'd live a couple hundred years. I'm only scratching the surface here, but I'm just giving you kind of an idea. Okay?
Something to
Bill,
think
does
about.
that go for dogs too?
Dogs making vitamin C. They make their own vitamin C.
Yeah, they do.
Next slide. So here's something that happened in Canada. It's a little bit complicated slide, but I'll try and give it to you. They took mice, and they lived, just look at this number, almost 24 months, 2 years. And then they took the gene inside that makes the vitamin C internally, because they make vitamin C, and they nixed it. Didn't work. And they only live about 8 months. See it here? 24, 8.
Oh, wow.
Got their lifespan.
So here's the mouse that is making his own internal vitamin C. Here's the mouse that goofed up his genes in the liver, and now he only makes, he doesn't make the vitamin C at all, and he only lives 8 months next to 24 months. So then in the diet, they put back enough vitamin C to get the blood level where it was when they made it internally. And how long does the animal live? 23 months. Almost, look. Almost. Okay, so let's retranslate this. Let's extrapolate to humans.
Yes.
We are here.
Uh-huh.
The animals are there. If we got enough vitamin C, we would go to there. So the genes in a mouse, by the way, are very similar to humans. So we are only living 1/3 as long as we should, and we should be living 2/3 longer. Or in other words, you go right up here, we live 80 years, you could live 216 years.
Wow.
That makes sense.
And the
Wow.
216, excuse me for walking away from my audience,
Where'd he go?
so I made a little product called Formula 216. I'm not here to sell it,
That's why.
but just understand what this is about, okay?
Oh, you call it
So-
216.
What happened, next slide. What happened is in this formula, we found out that they did a study, next slide, and they found an olive molecule, and it doubled the vitamin C blood levels in humans. And we went, oh my God, maybe they fixed the gene. Maybe. I won't go into that
That's interesting.
because I haven't got time. But you see here, this is Tom Levy, the famous doctor on vitamin C. Here we did a urine stick test
Yeah.
of the urine and the vitamin C levels. Then we did a blood level. Look, they started at 34 here, 73, 17, 56. These are blood levels. They're just about doubling. No vitamin C given, just the olive molecule.
We're not eating enough olives.
you have to get the molecule extracted out of the olives because you haven't got enough of it in an olive.
The land of
Right.
And so we took that plus other known molecules that's going to help you make that enzyme again that we're missing. We know what those vitamins are, vitamin A and so on. And we put them in this. And we got this study. And we're taking you back to the times before Noah. There.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
So there's all
Wow.
molecule.
It's in here, but you have to have some other cofactors to make it work. Oh, okay, so go again, son.
Do we get a refund if it doesn't get to
Yeah.
Bill will be there on your 215th birthday
No,
to cash
tongue
in.
in
two
on.
lifetime guarantee?
Hold on. Tongue-in-cheek guarantee. Here it is. If you live to 100, send us your birth certificate, and you've been taking, we can see the record, you've been buying a product, then we'll give you a lifetime supply for your remaining lifetime. If you don't live to 100, send us your receipts and we will give you your money back.
Dun.
You're under the ground, you kids. It's obviously a disingenuous offer.
But you have to come in person to get the refund.
Remember, I'm a huckster and I sell vitamins. Okay, so why do we grow old? You know, I used to go to summer camp and I used to go,
Children and what?
I'd look up at the sky and I'd think about, you know, they were trying to get us to think about serious things, and I go, hey, you know, why do we have to die, God? You know, well, wait a minute. Tomorrow I'm going to be a day older. How does that, what happened? No, I don't know what happened. I don't know, a clock moved and I got older?
Yeah.
So there's a difference between your biological time and your chronological time. Okay, and the question is, therefore we do not lose heart, but though through our outward man is decaying, yet our inner man is being renewed day by day, it says here. We know that's spiritual. We know we need to renew ourselves. But go ahead. So 2 times humans shortened their lifespan. In the Garden of Eden by eating the wrong food, defying gas, right? And the Noah's flood, which was just explained. Next slide. So the scientists are just now beginning to reveal the biblical secrets of longevity. Go ahead, son. And here we just restrict people of food. We give them 1 meal a day. That's all the calories they get. And what happens? Here's a 10% calorie. Here's a 60%. And they're living that much longer. See over here. See over here. And this is called a calorie-restricted diet. Where did they get that idea from?
Fasting in the Bible.
Moses? Fasting? Okay, so you can see how advanced kind of the Bible gets here. So we're not to fast to live longer. We're to fast to purify ourselves, to commit ourselves to God, to deny food, to deny these things. We're not doing this like the pagans do to just live longer.
Thanks.
That's not our objective. That would be shortchanging God. He'd kick us out of his temple just like he did the money changers. So next slide. So Jesus fasted 40 days. We find out today in the scientific articles you can't fast more than 40 days. You'll be killing yourself. Next slide. Fasting was not required of the disciples of Jesus. They came to him saying, why do we and the Pharisees fast often, but the disciples fast not? Go ahead, son. Scripture warns that in the last days there will be many forbidding to marry. Is that what they're doing, this sex change thing? And commanding us to abstain from meats. That's part of the global war. That's their deal. And we're to test the spirits and see. See, this is all told in the book of Timothy here. And so we have herbivores, omnivores, and carnivores. We're omnivores. We're all eating meat and we're all doing both. If you're going to do this, you're not going to have enough zinc. You're not going to have enough iron. You're not going to have enough fatty acids like the omega-3s. You're going to have issues, and I do tell people, fine, stay there, but you need to fortify your diet. You're going to be in trouble. But it's okay. Here, so here's the things you're deficient in. So there's an animal on one side, and he's been fasted, and the other one hasn't, and this guy's old, and this guy is still okay. But if you want to look at the animals, they actually keep their skin, and they do everything as they make vitamin C. Next slide. And the modern terminology for biblical fasting is calorie restriction. At age 80, Moses fasts for 40 days, lives 120. So he purified Took a lot of iron out of his body is what he did. So why do we get old? Next slide. Well, we age at 3 different speeds. We don't age at all biologically while we're growing. We're growing, all the iron, all the calcium, all the copper, the 3 main minerals has some place to go. Bone, calcium, iron, red blood cells, copper, connective tissue. So we do not age biologically. You can look in a microscope at the slides, you're 1-year-old, you're 18 years old, they're the same. Exactly the same. Something happens after you stop growing. You do not need as much of the minerals. And they accumulate. First in men, not in women. The women are going to dump the iron in their monthly flow, be protected from disease because they're the baby carriers. We got to protect them. They're going to be a little anemic, but you can't put them in the grave. They're going to live far longer than men because they're on the
You
anemic
can't put
side.
'em in the
Iron
grave.
feeds cancer. Iron feeds infection. Iron is bad. So here you needed all the iron you could get. You can't overload with iron. The little baby in the high chair just plump because it can't get enough iron to make enough red blood cells, and you just crash out.
So don't
That's-
supplement with iron at this age?
When you're young and growing, you don't want to. You need to eat red meat. Iron pills is going to give you nausea and constipation. You need to get it out of red meat. That's why this whole thing being anti-meat and all that.
Yeah.
No way to go. You're going to kill off the moms and you're going to kill off the kids because moms have to have all this iron to replace for the next kid.
Yeah.
And so when growth ceases, the men start accumulating iron, calcium. By the time they're 40 years old, here's their rate of aging. By the time the man is 40, he's going to have 4 times as much calcium, twice as much iron, and double the rate of diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. Wait a minute. If a woman gets a hysterectomy early, same rate of disease as the man. And then the disease rate is going, but it levels off. We call it the barrel's full. So there's only one explanation for this theory of aging. It's called the over-mineralization theory of aging. In other words, men should stop eating so much red meat and a lot of dairy products when they're young, after full growth. Women should do that after they've had all their babies and when the change of life has occurred. But minerals are going to kill you. This is what drives aging. When you fast, you don't get the minerals, and that's what drives and changes the genes. Next slide. So women are aged slower than men. All what I've just been explaining. Next. And the Scandinavian countries have the grasslands, North America, New Zealand, and they have high rates of cardiovascular disease because their arteries are all calcified. Too much dairy. Cheese is fine.
Cheese. Oh,
And,
cheese is
and
okay?
too much red meat.
Cheese is okay?
Yeah, cheese is great. Well, you need something. You need some.
He's making fun of me because I like cheese.
I love it.
Shannon can't
We
live
love
without
our cheese.
So, next slide.
Shannon needs
So
cheese.
these kind of things, rice bran, mulberries, grapes, all these kind of things you hear, these chelate are attached to the minerals so that they can take it out. And you get chelation going here. I made another pill to do all this. What did they do to us? They told us, this was called the overeaters pyramid in my mind. We were going to eat 17 to 23 servings of food a day.
Wow.
What?
How's that possible?
I need
Yes.
8 servings of food at breakfast to do this.
That's hilarious.
Wow.
They were doing this for the commercial companies
Oh,
to
yeah.
make money. And they figured out a couple of things.
Oh, wow.
If they can just stick that fructose in there, we are going to keep eating and eating and eating. And so they blame us for losing self-control. The reward center in your brain for bedroom pleasure and food is the same one. And that's for food. Okay, and so they spike the foods to hit that pleasure center, and you can't stop eating. They know what they're doing. It's us versus the food companies. Next slide. And so we have all of this nonsense, and you know, you go to Japan, they're thin.
Yeah, there you
Why
go.
are they thin? They have so many foods. The 18 dishwasher problems, these little dishes, and they eat all this fried food. We just have 2 or 3. We have the mashed potatoes and the hamburger and the this fries, whatever it is. We just don't have enough of the variety. But gluttony is certainly an issue. But we've done this to ourselves. We've programmed it in so the food companies can make the money. Next slide. And so this is what you get. All this stuff that makes kids eat and eat and eat. And they design these things so you're going to eat the cookies to the bottom of the bag. Can you stop eating that little crinkles or whatever they call it? So they add the MSG, aspartame, high fructose. Keep going. The failure of modern medicine, it's a disease care system, not a healthcare system.
Yeah.
We have not lost faith, but we have transferred it from God to the medical profession.
Oh, well.
George Bernard Shaw. Next slide.
Can I ask you something?
Why do prescribe,
We
why,
have a question here.
On the food, should we just be eating one meal a day like it said before?
No.
No, don't eat one meal.
no, what, I mean, if you're an older adult and you're 40 years old and you want to lose weight, you can try a period of calorie restriction or fasting or intermittent fasting.
Okay.
Those are all paid. You don't want to do it for a woman while she's anywhere near being fertile and having babies, all those kind of things. So here's all the prescribed drugs. I go on the radio and say, the giant fraud of all time, the biological action of every prescription drug can be duplicated with a dietary supplement. Quiz me, I'll tell you which one it is. Which drug are you taking? I'll tell you. You want a beta blocker, slow your heart rate, that's fish oil. You know, you want to lower your blood pressure, and they give it to you with something that hits the kidneys. No, you want zinc, that does that. And I just go on and on and on until you're just ad nauseum. So
Good.
So anti-diabetic drugs cause a person to become overweight. Only metformin doesn't do that. The rest of them, you get overweight. There's no evidence that cholesterol-lowering drugs lower mortality rates. They lower the risk of a non-mortal heart attack by 1 in 240 people over 5 years. If you want to take that pill, that's yours. It's a liver toxin also.
Wow.
Why do all cancer chemotherapy drugs result in tumor resistance? You see, they go to a point and you're out of luck at some point. Why do none of the medical drugs that control high blood pressure address the cause? We could talk about that. Why does the heartburn antacid drugs induce greater problems? If you withdraw, you get worse heartburn, because it's all set up to do that. So, and germ resistance. Next slide. So, sorcery appears in the New Testament, King James. For thy sorceries, or pharmaceuticals, we're all nations deceived, and in her Babylon was found the blood of the prophets, saints, and all were slain upon the earth.
Oh
And
my
this is
gosh.
us. Is Big Pharma taking over the world now?
Yes.
Okay, they are. Next slide.
So the word for sorceries in Greek is pharma.
Wow.
Pharmakia.
Pharmacia.
In Greek.
For by thy pharmakias, in Greek, untranslated,
Yes.
for all nations deceived.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So the biological action of all these can be done with dietary. So next
Yep,
slide.
absolutely.
For bodily exercise profits little, but godliness is profitable unto all things, having promise of the life that now is, and of that which is to come. As much as I love these vitamin pills, this is the about face. This is, I love doing this, I love being healthy, I love being 76 years old and still being able to play basketball. I love being able to run on my toes. I love all the things that I have enjoyed to do at my age and be disease-free. My optometrist at Costco looked at the back of my eye, and in the back of your eye you can see cholesterol.
Right.
It's called drusen. 91% of the people in my age group have drusen. A lot of it, little yellow spots. And so they do the test. I said, can you let me look at that scan? I said, how come I don't have any drusen? She says, I don't know. I said, do you want to know why?
I can tell you why.
She says, yes. I said, well, you're not really interested, so I'm not going to tell you. So I'm an anomaly. I don't have any of this drusen at my age. None. Zero. That means there's no brain plaque either.
Right.
It equates.
Yes.
So I'm sorry, but there are mental problems. So it hasn't fixed everything yet. Next slide. Their disease, Moliere. Next slide. In vain shalt thou use many medicines, for thou shalt not be cured. The book of Jeremiah. Next slide. And these alternatives are to lots of these things you see, blood pressure pills, antibiotics, weight
So
control.
amazing.
I just go on and on. People call me all day, email me all day.
I know they.
I have a little joke.
Sure, we like them.
I just need to become Catholic. You know, when am I gonna get the, two miracles, all I need to be a saint? I mean, I do this all day long on the, you know.
Yeah.
saving
Saint
people's
Sardi.
Vision and all this.
Right.
Saint
So,
Sardi.
next slide. Modern medicine is an
What happened to the
idolatrous.
joke? I was waiting for the
Well,
joke.
I'm
We didn't care, so you're not gonna tell us.
I'm gonna be a saint, right? You're gonna nominate me?
Yeah,
I mean, they got a couple of studies done.
you're
They-
nominated.
They use
Yes.
it. They use
I
it,
second
you know,
that.
and these people-
Yes.
These people are blind and they got their vision back. It's in the National Library of Medicine.
Yeah.
Nobody cares.
Oh.
We care, St. Bill.
Modern medicine.
Saint Bill.
We're just gonna call you Saint Bill.
Modern. You can see where you go here. Modern
Sardi.
medicine is an idolatrous religion.
Yes.
Thanks, Sardi,
Yes.
for that.
For what it
Thank
holds
you.
sacred are not living things, mechanical process. It doesn't boast of saving souls or lives, but of how many times this or that new machine was used and how much money was taken in by the process.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
This was the late Robert S.
Yeah.
Mendelsohn. Next slide, son. And he said, what were once called sins are no longer sins at all. Thus, homosexuality is now called an alternative lifestyle. It's a sin if you have your baby at home, but not a sin if you have an abortion. It's a sin if you go to a foreign god by another alternative medical practitioner, but not a sin if you go to a shrine of modern medicine for a sex change operation. Here we are.
Wow.
He wrote this 40 years ago.
Wow.
40 years ago.
Wow.
Next
We
slide.
wonder what's happened. It happens slowly.
Here's what we're called to do. You got ahead of me. What can we do to heal the sick?
Yes.
I can get you all active in that without any of this knowledge.
Yeah.
All you need is a recipe for chicken soup.
Mhm.
Now, the secret of chicken soup is it's a hot water extract of whatever you put in there. It's going to buy hot water concentrated. So you're going to make your chicken soup and the chicken's in there, but you're pouring the garlic. I like to
Yes,
put the
yes,
cumin in.
yes.
You've got the onions. You've got all that stuff in there. It's going to make it an extract. It's going to make it concentrated. There is a secret to chicken soup. You put all those good things in. Then, of course, vegetables, you know, celery and all the stuff you like to pour in there. But it's those herbs that you put in there. How about a little paprika and a little, you know, turmeric and all these things, okay? And so you put them in and they taste great. And I have said, if you want to start a revolution in a church, ladies, what are the ladies about? Nurturing,
Yeah.
caring for dogs, for things. So when we hear of a neighbor who's sick, get that chicken soup recipe out there. Don't attach it to anything. Just run down the street and say, hey, listen, I heard you were sick, and
Amen.
just show people that you care first.
So nice.
Mhm.
Because we are leading with the wrong foot. I was in Israel. I was with a man who was there. He's Jewish. He left here to go tell his Jewish people about their Messiah. And he was telling them how much theology he knew and what he knew and all this stuff. It didn't ring. He had a fallow ministry after 3 years. I said, he was at lunch with me. He was griping about the Jews. He said they're very hard-hearted. I said, you kind of have the same problem Jesus had. You're here in Jerusalem. You need to go where the common people are. Where he went, where the fishermen were. And I said, when was the last time you collected clothes for people that didn't have any clothes? When was the last time that you had a food bank for people that don't have money to buy food? You see, Jesus knew that people couldn't listen if they were hungry. He knew that.
Right.
He knew it. Okay, and so, you know, we have to show people we care before we show them how much we know. We know all about God. Too much. But it's not going to resonate unless we show them how much we care. That's why it's so important to listen to a man like Jolliffe when he tells us life is not changing. Nothing is changing. You're coming to church. Your head does this.
Yes.
You want to change your life? Start with other people.
Right.
Start with making them feel like they belong at church. Start doing things with people that are unchurched. Just bring them the chicken soup.
Yeah.
With a lot of garlic and onion and.
You got it.
It's American.
Sounds good to me.
Chicken soup for the soul.
Here's
Yes, chicken soup for the soul.
Oh,
Yep.
this one's, yeah.
Next
soul
one.
and body.
In regard to faith healings, this is a decisive and embarrassing part of the church. So fake healers, staged healings.
Yes.
Benny Hinn has a deal where this guy's leg was shorter than the other and he lengthens it, and of course the next day they do the same thing. That's unbelievable. Anyway, next slide. So, in the book of Corinthians, the Apostle Paul, attempting to bring the believers together so that there's no divisions in the body of believers, Paul spoke of a hierarchy. First apostles, prophets, teachers, miracles, gifts, healings. Uh-oh. Where are we? Halfway down. Come on.
Yeah.
Get real. These are more important. Healings is there, though. Why don't we see healings today? Because we don't see any chicken soup. You're looking for you're looking for an instant miracle. I'm trying to get you to help a natural miracle. God made a self-healing body. So this goes on. Earnestly desire the greatest gifts. Next slide. So the non-healings in the Bible, so we talk about them. Paul couldn't heal his people that he lived with, himself, his beloved friend, so on. There's examples. Next slide. And here we are back in Lystra. And they're going to make gods out of these guys. And he says, no, we're not gods.
There you go.
We're not. Next slide. I was hungry and you gave me food. And when I was thirsty and you gave me drink. And I was sick and you visited me. And you did it in the least of these, you did it to me. So there's the chicken soup idea. Next slide. Are any among you sick? They should call for the elders of the church and have them pray over them and anoint them with oil in the name of the Lord. Do you know what olive oil was? You don't know. They didn't filter it.
Yeah.
It had 30 times more goobers in it. Solids. The polyphenols that I put in my pills.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that made the vitamin C work again. That's what olive oil was when the Bible times. The wine wasn't filtered. It had solids. My dad got wine from Italy. He was healthy most of his life, and there were solids in the bottom. People would think, get that stuff out of there. No, that's the stuff. There were 30. It was an anti-aging pill at the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jesus was drinking wine and
Yeah.
he gets on the cross there. He's like, he's a miracle. He's got this thing in him. He could withstand. He could fast. He could do all these things. Next slide. For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know even as also as I am known. 1 Corinthians. We don't have a time machine. There is no way of knowing conclusively of the crucifixion, the resurrection occurred. The Apostle Paul said we only know in part about all of these things. We weren't there. Or were we? Next slide. Unless you see signs and wonders, you simply will not believe, said Jesus. You have to have the miracles. We've taken the miracles out of the church. Next slide. Whatever city you enter and they receive you, eat what is put before you. Help those who are sick. Say to them, the kingdom of God is come near you if they're healed. Very verily I say to you, he that believeth on me and works shall do also. Greater works than these shall he do.
Yeah.
We're not doing them, are we? Next slide. But what about the miracles? Is there any scientific credibility? Next slide. People were brought to him, all that were diseased. Next slide. Here's Jairus' daughter. Jairus comes and interrupts Jesus' church service. He's teaching these guys, and he says, my daughter has died. They said, not to bother the teacher. He says, we're breaking it up, I'm going. She's not dead, she's asleep. Let me say it again. She's not dead, she's asleep. Now look, he has foreknowledge of some kind. If this is not right, the Bible's going to say, he was right about everything, but this one he was wrong. How would he know? So, someone from the ruler's house came, said, your daughter's dead. Not to trouble the teacher anymore. Do not weep. She's not dead, but sleeping. I want you to think coma. Sleeping. Next slide. Jairus, he chases the people away that were mourning, and Jairus pleads for him to come and help his 12-year-old daughter. Your daughter has died, so why trouble the teacher anymore, they said. 12-year-old girl. Next slide. Jesus with Jairus' daughter, shown by this artist. Next slide. And they took her by the hand and called, Maid, arise, he said. And he commanded her. 12-year-old girl. Maybe. Don't let me take the miracle away. They think this is a healing from the dead. I think it's what Jesus said it was. She was sleeping. She was in a coma. She was so anemic, she had lost blood from her first menstrual cycle. You're dead stone cold when you're anemic. Your body's cold when you're dead, and it's cold when you're anemic. You haven't got enough red blood cells to carry heat to your extremities. You pass out. Young girls do it all the time. And on top of it, they had parasites in their system. The water was not clean. You see in these third world countries, these people are short. The parasites get all the nutrients and they don't grow tall. And they had a practice in those days. The kids ate the food that was left over after the adults ate. So they didn't get good food. Right. I'm saying maybe, just maybe, this girl was anemic. If she was, at the end of that chapter, and he commanded to give her some meat. Iron in vegetables is there. It's not there. It's not absorbed very well. In meat, you're going to get 18 milligrams of iron in a piece of red meat, 12 milligrams in chicken. You get 5 milligrams in spinach, but you hardly get any absorbed. Wait a minute. Is this just like happenstance, or does he know? Because next slide. See, she's not dead. She's asleep. Next slide. And he commands that something should be given her to eat. Yeah. And here's anemia, and here's normal. Next slide. And so he heals her. And this is the wrong thing. So what happens is red meat. Meat is high absorbable iron. Does that mean that he knows what anemia is? We didn't know what it was until the year 1700. What would that tell you? Jesus is
the great physician,
the creator. He would know how we're put together. He would know. When I studied these things, I got down on my knees. So here we are, commanded to give her something to eat. Next slide. So Jesus heals a blind man, and this was the one. There's 2 or 3 of these, but so they could put a fake healer in the audience. I can't see. Oh, healing. Oh, I can see now. So those are fake healers. So they go to the house of this guy that says he can see, and does he like this since birth? Yes. So they check on the veracity of this. So what did Jesus do? Well, he asked him, here, see, I see, he puts clay on his eyes. Spittle and clay, not on the eye, right here, this cornea, the clear part of the eye. He asked him, how do you see now? He says, I see men, but they look like tall trees walking. The perfect description of vertical astigmatism, a funhouse mirror stretched tall. Vertical astigmatism. He goes back, does it again, and Matthew, and they put his hand on it again, and he made him look up, and he was restored and saw every man clearly. Was Jesus putting a contact lens on the cornea and changing the curvature with clay? Yeah. This has to be done with micron accuracy. We do it today. It's called LASIK surgery. We change the shape of the cornea and we correct the astigmatism and all these aberrations. The only way you know this is you know how the eye is designed. You know that there are lenses here, and it focuses the eye, the back of the eye to a certain point, like a magnifying glass in the sun, where we can heat up something. That isn't known until the year 1800. Next slide. You could apply a contact lens to reshape. Next slide. This man, Helmholtz, develops this. You know when your guy gets the little thing and looks in your eye right up close to you? That's the ophthalmoscope. Then we know this, 1800s. Jesus would have had to know this 1800 years before? What does that make him? The creator.
Yeah.
He knows the optics of the eye.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm down on my knees going, this all makes perfect medical sense. This is a bigger thing than you think that story is about, because he's revealing that he's the creator. Somewhere here he has to do it, and here he is doing it. Next slide. No one can do miracles which you do if God were not with him, said Nicodemus. Next slide. It is not those who are well who need a physician, but those who are sick. I have not come to call the righteous men, but sinners to repentance. Next slide. This has a evangelistic part. Imagine I'm talking to we're all terminally ill. We have the Adam and Eve disease. We can't heal ourselves because of this terminal disease. Next slide. No matter how hard we try, we can't get well. Next slide. Man, God, the bridge. No matter how hard we try to run to the other side of the cliff where everlasting life is, we always fall short. Next slide. Jesus went to the operating table for us. It wasn't he didn't absolve us of our sins. It was what we call a substitutionary death. My name on his body. Next slide. Absolution versus substitution. People don't quite understand. They think we're absolved of our sins. Go to the Catholic priest, you're absolved. No, you're not absolved. There was a substitutionary death. He dies in our place. Next slide. Was the crucifixion real? Did Jesus really die? I'm really interested, because after that, it all could have been faked. So I want to know he died, not that he rose from the dead. A Roman soldier thrusts a spear in his side. See, they were going to break everyone's legs, which was the tradition, because you killed, the Roman centurion would be killed if he didn't kill the guy on the cross. They didn't break his leg like they normally did. So they took the spear and put it in his side. And what does the Bible tell us? Next slide. It says, go back, water and blood spewed out. The blood serum separated from the red cells. Milk, cream, separates, the heaviest thing. The red cells are heavier. Next slide. They're here, there's the serum. He's telling you there's no circulation. It already separated, and he's dead. That's what that is telling you in the scripture. He's dead. There's no circulation. You can't take the blood plasma and mix it. It's going to be mixed. When it's separated, you're dead. That's what it's telling you. He is dead. You need to know he's dead. Next slide. In the biblical account of the crucifixion, an earthquake and a darkness came over the land between 12 and 3 p.m. that coincided with Jesus' crucifixion is explained in the Gospel of Matthew. The historian Eusebius of Caesarea cites Phlegon, who wrote that in the year 2032 to 33, a great eclipse occurred in the 6th hour that excelled every other before it, turning the day into such darkness of the night that the stars could be seen in heaven and the earth moved and toppling many buildings. This is extra biblical, but it's important for us to understand. Somebody else saw it. Next slide. So there is an event that occurred that tells us that Jesus lived and died for us. You know, I have been in Israel and I walked up the steps of the Second Temple where Jesus chased out the money changers. But those steps had been there for a long time. That doesn't tell me that Jesus lived there. I can go to the Sea of Galilee, but that was there for a long time. Doesn't tell me anything that says it was Jesus but it's in the Bible. It's accurate. I can go to Bethlehem, but we don't know where he was born there, and we don't know all of that, and those things have been there for years. So, what evidence do I have? If you go, you'll learn about Judas. And when they came to Jerusalem, they had to pay a little tax, like a hotel tax. So he went, and he was paying the money, and they said, oh, Judas, do you know where this Jesus guy is? We don't know what he looks like, and where does he hang out? Garden of Gethsemane. He betrays Jesus. They gave him some money for this. The 30 pieces of silver. And what did he do with them? All of a sudden he realized he betrayed Jesus, and he threw the money back in. And what did they do with the coins? They bought the potter's field. The potter's field today is called the Field of Blood, is a basilica called Hakeldama. It's a large square sepulcher. Next slide. Here it is. I've been in the Kidron Valley. I've been to the Garden of Gethsemane. I've been to the Eastern Gate. And right down there is this thing, and this is the basilica over the potter's field. The potter's field only occurred because of 1 week when they killed Jesus. It tells me it's true. This is true. This event in that place didn't occur. They buried non-Jewish people there. When the Crusaders came, they buried them here, not in the Jewish. This is where they buried them. It became a burial field because you couldn't grow anything there. The pots were all there and wrecked everything. And so this was the story, and this whole thing came about because of 1 week in history when Jesus died. And Judas betrayed him. And that's still there to tell me that. That's more important than any edifice anywhere in the Middle East. And all of the stuff that we have. Next slide. So, this one's very interesting. Dionysius, a pagan philosopher at the time, was present in Heliopolis, modern Cairo. When a catastrophe occurred, the company of a philosopher friend, Apollophanes, and his accounts read as follows. We, Apollophanes and himself, were both present standing together in Heliopolis when we saw the moon falling into alignment with the sun in an abnormal way, for it was not right time of conjunction. And then again we saw the moon. This is the event I was telling you about, the eclipse. Here's a man in Egypt telling you he knew that occurred, extra biblically. Extra biblically. Paul meets this guy at the Areopagus in Greece. That's where they gave open speeches. And he meets him. And next slide, Mars Hill. And Dionysius explains, wait a minute, I saw this. I was in Egypt. You're talking about the earthquake. You're talking about the eclipse. I was there. I was over here in Egypt when I saw it. And he becomes a Christian, falls on his knees, and said, how did Paul know all this? And he said, you can't make this, the moon and the sun. Somebody's behind this. It's God. And he becomes a Christian because of this. Maybe it is real. Next slide. What evidence did Jesus provide his disciples of his resurrection? Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my hand to his side, I will not believe it. But someone did. Thomas. He who has the Son has life. He does not have the Son of God, does not have life. We are in a relationship. We are not in a religion. Please, by all means, abandon religion. Next. Whosoever shall confess that Jesus is the Son of God, God will dwell within him, and he in God. Herein is love. Not that we love God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. So there are songs that we sing at church, and some of them have to do with loving God. But it doesn't count until he loved us first. You go talk to Jolliffe how important that is to know. And then you'll have your life changed. It does no good for you to love God. He had to love us first. There's no hope otherwise. Go on. How do you know Jesus is God? If I do not do the works of my Father and do not believe me, but if I do them, though you do not believe me, believe in my works, that you may know and understand that the Father is in me and I in the Father. They won't believe. They want to see the miracles. Next slide. Jesus doesn't come barging into our life. I stand at the door and knock. He comes by revelation, revealing something about himself. Next slide. To get into God's eternal kingdom, you need to know the doorman, and the password is Jesus. You did all these good works? I never knew. You can do all the chicken soup you want. We're not getting to heaven because of that. We're getting to heaven because he died for us. Next slide. Peter said of himself, neither is there salvation in any other, for there's none other name under heaven given men whereby we must be saved. Jesus said of himself, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man can cometh to the Father but by me. Next slide. Jesus feeds the 5,000 fishes and loaves. Unless you people see signs and wonder, you simply will not believe. Next slide. We do not believe in a God who didn't suffer himself. You realize that every other religion, every other God doesn't have a God that suffers? God suffered with us. He is God's Son. He's suffering with us. You want to ask, why do I have to suffer, God? He did too. The only religion where God suffered with us. Now my soul is troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour, for this purpose should come. Son, next one. What kind of man is this who can say this? I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things which have been kept secret from the foundation of the world. Next slide. What kind of man can say, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every mouth that proceeded out of the mouth of God? What is it that we need to get to heaven? A vitamin pill? I'll tell you what it is. Next slide. Jesus came into Caesarea Philippi. He asked disciples, saying, who do men say that I am the Son of God? And they said, some say that you're John the Baptist or the prophets. And men said unto them, but whom shall you say that I am? Next slide. The Bible teaches us to obtain water from deep sources rather than surface waters. The birds poop on it. Next slide. Living water. Jesus answered and said unto her, if thou knewest of the gift of God, and who it is that saith to thee, give me to drink, thou wouldest have asked of him, and he would have given you living water. How does this man speak in these words? Next slide. Jesus stood and cried and saying, if any man thirst, let him come unto me and drink. Next slide. Jesus said, but whosoever drinks of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst, but the water that I give shall be in him the well of water springing up in the everlasting life. Next slide. And Jesus said unto him, I am the bread of life, and he that cometh to me shall never hunger, and he that believeth on me shall never thirst. Next slide. And to those who are healed, we say to them, the kingdom of God has come nigh unto you. What is it that's going to make us have eternal life? Robert Schuller answered it for me in a phone call earlier this week. The Word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. Words. Words that enter our heart, and we know about his substitutionary. That's what we're going to do. Next slide. And when Jesus heard it, he said unto them, they that are whole have the need of the physician, but they that are sick, I came to call to them to righteousness and sinners to repentance. Next slide. Therefore I say unto you, take no thought of your life, what you'll eat, what you'll drink. Throw out the vitamin pills. Here's what we're talking about. Next slide. And then said Jesus unto his disciples, if any man will come unto me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, go thy way, sell whatever you have, and that shall be your treasure, and so on. We know these scriptures. Next slide. So if you're talking to a Christian or a non-Christian, presume it's a non-Christian, are you trying to get that person to say yes or no? You're trying to get him to say no. This comes from an FBI negotiator. When you're talking with somebody and you're going to lose lives, You'll never convince him to say yes because he's not sure what he said yes to. There's no document. There could be more. What did I just say yes to? So if you ask somebody, will you accept Jesus now? He can't say it because he's not sure exactly what's the fine print. What am I getting into? But if you ask this question, is there any good reason why you wouldn't want to follow Jesus now after you've learned everything you've learned tonight? No. You see how easy it is? You need to ask your friends after you've presented Jesus to them, is there any good reason why you wouldn't accept Jesus right now? No. You want to convert people? Get them to say no. Present it this way.
Reverse
Present it this
psychology.
way. Next slide.
Yeah.
Most of us will spend our entire lifetime climbing the ladder just to realize at the end of our life we're on the wrong ladder. I didn't write that. This guy's not a Christian. Be still, know that I am God. Fear ends where faith begins. Last slide. The last story. Paul on the road to Damascus. Next slide. The road to Damascus, Jesus came to talk to him. He never met Jesus. But this was after things go on. What went on? Well, a light came from heaven. He talks to Jesus, who are you, Lord? And all this. Go to the next slide. And so what happens is he gets struck by lightning on the road. You know, lightning can come down in a clear sky. It's friction. It's atoms. And he gets struck by a light. It says brighter than the sun. The only light we know is brighter than the sun is lightning. Some preachers will say, no, this was from God. Okay. But he gets struck. Happened to be a physician, an eye physician in Michigan, writing in the Survey of Ophthalmology in 1994. And he had a young man who happened to be working in a pizza parlor, and he opened the little door to see if the pizzas were cooking, and the flash flame hit the boy's eyes. And his corneas got burned. It's bloodless. And you put anesthetic, and you put antibiotic cream, and you put pads over those eyes so he can't move them real tight, because if he moves, it'll hurt. And then you bring him back in 3 days later. Why 3? Because the cornea heals itself in 3 days. It's bloodless. It heals itself in 3 days. And the bandage is removed, and the ophthalmologist said scales fell off of his eyes. Just like the story of Paul and Ananias comes and lays hands on him, and they said scales fell off of his eyes. The cornea, the old cornea fell off, and he got a new one in 3 days. That is a natural healing. God just had Ananias come over and lay hands on him. That's a natural healing. The scales fell off. The ophthalmologist is telling us this. Okay? He just got Ananias to do this on time. And so, and this is what happened. Next slide. I hope God doesn't have to blind you before you believe. Next slide. What are we to do? Get baptized. Come and follow me. That's what Jesus is asking. Next slide. In remembrance of me, do this. In remembrance of me. Next slide. I will never leave you. I'm with you always till the end of the world. And finally, next slide, we get a new body. It says, and the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Just as we've become the image of man, dust shall also bear the image of man. And it says that, the dust returns to the earth. We're not going with our body. We're going to get it alludes to a new body. For God so loved the world. Vitamin L, the best vitamin. People won't listen to what you know until you show them how much you care. Chicken soup. Next slide.
That's the last slide.
Ah, bravo.